G'day and welcome to Beyond Sobriety, a podcast where real stories of resilience and recovery come to life. I'm Michael and I'm an alcoholic, your host and fellow journeyer on the road to sobriety. As somebody who has walked the path of addiction and found solace in the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, I understand the challenges and triumphs that come with striving for sobriety. And it's with this understanding and empathy we've created this podcast. Our purpose here at Beyond Sobriety is simple yet profound, to provide a platform where individuals can share their experience of alcoholism openly and authentically. Through candid conversation, personal narrative, and expert insights, we aim to inspire hope, foster understanding, and offer a beacon of light for those still navigating the shadows of addiction. We would love for you to be a part of this growing community. If you find value in the stories shared here, please consider liking, leaving a comment, and sharing the episode with others who might benefit from it. Your support helps spread the message of hope and resilience to more people in need. I'm Michael, and I'm an alcoholic, and this is Beyond Sobriety.
So I'm Tracy. I'm 48 years old, and I have been sober for 3 years, 7 months.
3 years, 7 months. Wow. So you know what? That's about almost exactly the same amount of time that I've been sober.
Wow, there you go.
So we must have come into the rooms about the same time. Where did you first start coming to AA?
Where my first meeting was at Camden, Sunday morning group.
Yep.
Yeah. I was living out at Oakdale at the time, so do I say that? No, it doesn't mean you can get it.
You say whatever you want.
And I was actually my housemate at the time, who I'm now sharing this house with, he took me to my first meeting. I had been in the rooms before that. I was first introduced to AA through a rehab at the end of 2019. I actually moved to Sydney to get my recovery. I went to a rehab and I was sober maybe 4.5 months. I left rehab. This was during COVID, and they told me not to leave because they told me the whole world had changed, and they were right. I got out and I was living in a new place and I didn't have any supports and I just wasn't ready. There were no face-to-face meetings, and it just didn't take me long. Something happened in my life that I couldn't cope with, and I was straight up the bottle shop and sat in the park and drank a 6-pack. So that
would have been during the first lockdowns, I imagine, in early 2020.
Yeah,
because I came just in between that.
Yeah.
What made you go to rehab? What happened?
Well, by the end of my story, drugs are a big part of my story as well. So in the end, I had substituted alcohol for methamphetamine. So I was using a lot and basically I was psychotic. By the end of it, I just wanted to die. And I was in psychosis, and my solution was I was going to walk off into the desert.
Okay.
I was going to walk off into the desert.
I always imagine myself walking off into the sea. So you're the desert. We might be polar opposites. But we found it just in time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And basically, I was with a guy at the time who I'd been with for a long time, and, we drank and drugged together a lot. He was probably my biggest trigger, and he had been kicked out of town because of, violence and all the stuff that goes on when you're in a really toxic relationship. And he'd been kicked out of town, so he was sent back to Sydney, which is where he was from. So basically I asked him to take me with him so I could try and get well, but that wasn't the whole truth. Part of me wanted to cling on to that relationship too, and so I tried to, and, out of that rehab, and I had this perfect vision of what the relationship was going to look like when I got out of the rehab, and he was going to get sober as well, and, we're all going to live happily ever after. But the reality was he didn't want to. He was still drinking and drugging, and for the next year after I picked up again after that little incident in the park with the 6-pack, I spent another year doing the same thing, and it was just getting worse and worse. And I'd had a taste of recovery, and I actually found a journal that I'd been keeping during that year, and like the different times that I'd actually tried to get myself back into the rooms. I just guess I wasn't ready, By the end of that year, I'd given myself a time limit for that relationship, I think, because it'd been, that insanity of going around and around in circles, doing the same thing over and over again, and expecting a different result, But by the end of that year, I I'd said enough's enough, and I chose recovery, basically.
Because it's just so familiar to keep on doing what you're doing, and it's so hard to stop. But
that's the thing.
Yeah.
That's the important point. It's like that was my safe place because that's what I knew, and anything outside of that, like I was full of anxiety. I was having, by this stage I was having panic attacks, and I was just a mess. I couldn't do life at all.
Absolutely.
I couldn't drive to the supermarket. Like I'd basically, in that last year, I'd really isolated myself or cut myself off from everybody. Yeah, so I was a shell of a person, Yeah, I was sick and tired of being sick and tired, basically. I couldn't live like that anymore. I knew, like, death, there was either death or recovery. That was my options, I guess I didn't want to die. I did, but I didn't,
It's that, I get it. It's those two forces.
Yeah.
Can you describe the environment and attitude towards alcohol in your family when you were a child?
Well, I grew up in a big drinking culture. Yeah, I grew up in a small country town. My stepfather was an alcoholic. My mum was a heavy drinker. I think, though, she just sort of did what he did, so she went along with him. We're always surrounded by alcohol. I remember, like, as a child, like on Christmas Day, like we were allowed to have a glass of wine. I think, like, I spent a lot of time with my nan growing up as well, and from what I've heard, she was a closet alcoholic. She used to hide bottles around the house. She was one that used to hide bottles around the house, and I remember going and finding them with my cousin. We'd seek out her bottles and have a drink of those. But yeah, I thought drinking was a normal thing to do growing up. There were a lot of parties where, the adults are all drinking and the kids are just sort of left to their own devices, and kids are seen and not heard. You go off and do your thing, we're doing ours. But yeah, basically, I thought that, alcohol was a normal way of life. So, I couldn't wait till I was 18 and I was going to be allowed to drink. I actually started going out with a guy when I was 15, and he was a lot older than me. I used to drink occasionally before I turned 18 if he would buy it, but I found it hard. Like, I couldn't go out anywhere because I wasn't 18, so I didn't drink a lot, but I used to smoke a lot of weed instead. That's, like I said, drugs are a big part of my story. So yeah. Alcohol and drugs went hand in hand.
So that would be when you started drinking around the ages of 15? Would you say that? 15, 16 or younger?
I had my first drink to black out when I was probably 14. I remember I was with some friends. My parents were away. That was the first night they trusted me to sort of stay home by myself. And a small country town, they're all going down the river. So I've gone down there where there was a bunch of guys and girls down there, and they had this flagon of whatever it was. And I remember drinking that night, and I didn't even drink that much. And I drank to black out that night. I remember I was staggering in the bushes, falling over. And when they were leaving, I remember sort of staggering up the street and them holding me up to get home. And that's all I remember. Apparently, I woke up the next morning in an unfamiliar house, my first blackout, and didn't know how I'd got there. And it was only across the road from my house, though. I didn't know where I was. And I had a bottle of Jack Daniels between my legs, and they're like, "Oh, no, you didn't drink that. That's okay. We just told Mum that you drank that because you were so drunk." Okay. So I didn't drink the Jack Daniels that night.
I'm not sure how to put this term, but, I guess a normal drinker is someone who I'll describe as having one or two, maybe occasionally getting a bit tipsy or drunk, but is, can stop and knows when to put it down. Were you ever like that, or was it always?
No, always all or nothing.
It's all or nothing?
From the get-go, yeah. I always drank to get drunk.
Yep.
Always. I was a binge drinker. And I drank anything and everything, and I would drink as quickly as possible to get myself as drunk as possible, as quickly as possible, because I thought that was where the fun was. And I guess coming to AA, made me realise that I was missing something inside myself, and that's why I always drank. There was a hole in me that I wanted to fill. When I drank, I felt confident. All my fears went away, and I could just be whoever I wanted to be, Took all that stuff, all the fear and stuff away, which is an amazing thing. So I was off and running. Heard someone share about it's like being 10 foot tall and bulletproof, and that's how I felt when I was drinking, and anything went, Yeah. And so it came a lot of bad decisions and, irresponsible behaviour. I'm surprised I survived, like big stacks I would have, the places I would put myself in, you know, during my drinking. Like, yeah, I'm surprised I survived it, but obviously God's got a plan for me, so I'm still here.
Oh, look, I believe God's got a plan for all of us, and I think everybody needs to find that in order to live the best possible life that they could possibly live. And one of the people I was helping once, he said, "Why are you doing this?" He said, "Why are you coming and spending time after, I'd work 10, 15 hours or, at the day, and then I'll go, look, we've got to go to a meeting, I'll drive." And he lived about an hour away, go pick him up. He goes, "Mate, you got a family, you got to, what are you doing with me?" And I said to him, it's because I believe that you're living only a shadow of the life that you should be living. Yeah. I said, and I want to be a small part. I'm just trying to help you find what God has for you. And look, I don't know if he was very drunk. I don't think I've ever seen him sober, but that was quite emotional for him. And I believe that. I believe that for you. I believe that for all of us. Everybody, if you've got a problem with alcohol or not, it doesn't matter. I think that that's what I like about AA, is that you can freely talk about God. So you described a fairly, I guess, reckless youth. What happened? Continue with your journey throughout your early to mid-20s, after you finish school. You can kind of get away with some stuff when you're young, but after a while, you need to have responsibilities, you need to work, you need to find an income. What happened with that?
Yeah, it was messy. It was very messy. I was lucky enough to stumble upon a career in training and development. I was working for a group training company. I remember I did a traineeship for them, and they offered me a position as a field officer. So, like, very young, like I was only about 20, I think 21, and I was offered this job, and I had a company car and phone. I had it all going on for me, but alcohol just kept getting in the way. Like, I had to party. Like, it was just something I had to do every week. And like, I wasn't much of a drinker during the week, but come to Thursday, we'd go to happy hour at one of the pubs because they had cheap drinks there, and I'd be off for the weekend. Sometimes I wouldn't get up for work on a Friday if we'd been out on the Thursday night. I'd be up all night drinking, and sometimes I'd be like, I just need an hour's sleep before I go to work, and then I wouldn't wake up.
Yeah. It was a little bit more tolerated, I think, back then. Like, at my work, we'd call it, like, you got paid on a Thursday as well, and they'd say, if you came to work late or hungover on a Friday, they're like, you're a payday baron. You went out on payday, you pissed up all your pay. And it was just seen as no one cared. Get down and do your job.
My boss cared. She didn't sack me, though. She didn't sack me, but she had a lot of words with me, about my behaviour. And she basically said to me, you come to work. If you've got a job, you come to work. If you don't come to work, you don't have a job. But still, I couldn't get myself to work, and that was my story all the way along with my working career. Like, I don't know how I managed to keep jobs. Maybe it was just the roles I took on, or the people. I don't know. Maybe they just liked me. I don't know, but I was just so unreliable. And it was always because of my drinking or drugging. I would it always got in the way of everything, but because that was the most important thing in my life. Like, and I didn't even realize it was. Didn't even realise that that's what was happening.
So if we were to fast forward up to, say, 5 years ago now, were you drinking every day and getting high, or was it just still on the weekends?
I was using every day, yeah. I was working then. I would drink when I wasn't using, but I was mainly using back then. I was working as a taxi driver, of all things. Yeah, working Friday and Saturday nights in a small town. And I had to use to get to work. Yeah. I had to use to function. And it was just crazy, absolute craziness. But it was the same thing there, once I'd stopped using, I'd need to rest, obviously, because with methamphetamine, I'd be awake for days and days. Yeah. And so then the body eventually going, no, shut down, you need to sleep, you need to rest.
So I'm an alcoholic. I don't know too much about drugs, but I know you got your uppers and downers. And methamphetamine, that's an upper?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The uppers. So you want to be...
Yeah, that was basically... And that was more by accident, I guess. Like, in my early 20s, I guess, I discovered that this was back when speed was around, so,
Okay.
and back in the days when they had the pills for the truckies, the uppers of the pills that the truckies used to take. So we'd be able to have those. So I'd take those, and that's like beautiful. I can have one of these and I can drink more, and I can smoke weed at the same time, and I'm fine, it didn't crash and burn. So like I loved it. So it was just something I did when I was drinking, it's like I'd have a bit of speed, then I could just party hardy, it was amazing. And then I guess what happened with that is they stopped making speed. They stopped making speed and they started making methamphetamine, which is much, much worse. And so, and in the end, you couldn't get meth and couldn't get speed anymore. You could only get meth. So, yeah, that's why I ended up having meth. But that was just a stupid decision too. Drinking one night with my partner, and someone else that was there had it, and he was like, "Do you want to have some of this?" And we talked about it, because we'd seen people doing it and saw how I had people, friends that were addicts, and saw what it did to them, and swore I was never going to do it myself. So we sat down and we talked about it, and we set some strict boundaries around it, but boundaries didn't matter when it came to that stuff. It's a really evil drug, and it took over really quickly. Like within a week or two, like we were fully hooked and off and running.
So like I would describe myself as an alcoholic that if given the opportunity, or if I was given some pain medicine, I'd probably overindulge in that a bit. Mm-hmm. So I'd say alcohol is my main addiction. How would you describe yourself?
Absolutely, I'm the same.
Okay.
I'm the same, definitely. I've always been an alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess for me, I describe myself as an addict. Like anything goes. Like you said, you overindulge in other things. I'm an addict to the core, I guess, like alcohol was my first love, but anything and everything,
You're chasing that high.
Yeah.
It's that feeling.
Chase that feeling just to get off myself, but yeah.
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 So like, I described it as disappearing. At 4 o'clock every day, I'll be like, I'm out of here. Yeah. My mind is checking out. I might be here physically, but I get to just explore my own self.
Yeah.
And just I might be physically present, but I'm not emotionally,
Absolutely.
intellectually there at all.
I didn't realise until I got sober how long I spent planning that next drink. Mm. Like every day my head would be planning where I was going to get it, what time I was going to finish work, where I was going to go, who I was going to drink with, the whole routine around. Like I didn't even realise that that's what I was doing. It was on a Friday afternoon. This is in my sobriety, and I had a realisation like, how good is this that I can actually spend my Friday present at work until knock off time without a thought of where I'm going to be going tonight, who I'm going to be drinking with, all that stuff. Like, I really don't miss that.
No. No, I don't either. The anxiety, the stress.
Yeah.
Now, when did you think it was in your life that you realised that you were not just a girl who liked to party and have fun, but that this was actually a problem and taking over your life?
Would have been when I was in my mid-30s, probably. I had a partner. I always surrounded myself with people who drank and drugged like I did. So I think I talked about already the partner I was with at the end of my using and drinking. He was an alcoholic, and I knew he was an alcoholic from the start. So, his total life revolved around alcohol. And in my mind, I wasn't as bad as him, So I guess that's why I surrounded myself with people like that, because I didn't have to look at myself then, because they were worse than what I was.
Yeah.
He was an all-day drinker and I wasn't at that stage, but that's when I started to become an all-day drinker. And I took on a job. I was working doing builders cleans. I took it on because it was really good money at the time. We were working really big days. And the women I was working with were all alcoholics as well. So we'd go on to job sites and it'd be 10 o'clock and they'd be like, Tracy, go to the bottle shop. So they'd send me off. I'd go to the bottle shop and we'd be hiding alcohol in cupboards because working on a building site, we're not allowed to be drinking.
No.
It's
a little bit frowned on.
Yeah, it is, definitely is. But yeah, we were hiding alcohols in cupboards and all over the house, and we were drinking throughout the day. And then we'd continue on when we'd be drinking in the van on the way home. We'd get back to the base. So we might travel an hour each day to get back to where we were based, and they had an alcohol fridge full of whatever you wanted. So we'd just keep drinking there, and then I'd go home and meet up with my partner, and then we'd go to the pub and we'd have a few more there, maybe get some dinner, usually takeaway dinner because we didn't want to eat while we're still drinking, and get up and do it all over again. You know, it was just.
So it was an all-day thing.
Absolutely. By that stage, and that's when I started to realize I think I might have a problem with this, and it really concerned me, but I had no clue what to do about it. So I just kept doing it. You know, I was like, my mind's like, oh, maybe I've got to quit this job because this job's no good for me. Like, I knew the problem was around alcohol, but it didn't enter my mind to stop drinking.
Okay.
It wasn't a part of the equation. I never considered stopping drinking. Like, I guess I just couldn't imagine my life without alcohol. You know, it had always been a big part of my life. So I always tried to control it. I do things to try and control my drinking. Like, I remember at different stages, I don't do so well when I'm drinking Black Sambuca. You know, I black out and I get really drunk, and then I do things I don't like doing. And so, all right, I'm going to cut out Black Sambuca. Or, you know, I felt like I was going to die when I drank a bottle of tequila and drank the worm. So definitely the tequila's the problem, you know, so we're not going to drink tequila anymore.
Those crazy lies we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
It's all the same. Did you have a defining rock bottom?
Well, with the alcohol, like I said, in the end, about that time when I decided that I was probably had a problem with alcohol, that's when we substituted. So because for me, I couldn't go without getting off myself, I suppose, you know. So then I took another long and slippery road down the methamphetamine part. So I guess by the end of it, I had no idea still in my mind that I was an alcoholic. I thought I was an addict, you know, and I went to the rehab and I thought I was an addict. And it wasn't until I came into AA, I met my sponsor and I started working the steps with my AA sponsor and started going through the big book. And I realised just through reading the stuff in the big book that I've always been an alcoholic, and I just didn't realise it.
Yeah.
I just had no clue. All the stuff in that big book made sense to me, and it was like it was written for me, you know. It was like, yeah, I had no doubts that I was an alcoholic after that. But, yeah, I denied it for such a long time, like, yeah.
What was your first meeting like? Not rehab, but AA?
It was amazing. I loved it.
And that was in Camden, you said?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, describe what happened. What did you do? Who did you go with? Or
I went with my next door neighbour. He drove me. I remember I was greeted there, you know, by someone who's still a part of my sobriety from far away. He's moved away, but, you know, I felt loved unconditionally by people who I didn't even know. Like, I felt like I was coming home, you know. I felt like this is where I need to be. Like, the stuff that I heard, every share during the meeting I related to, and I had no doubt that this is what I needed to do for myself if I was going to stay sober and turn my life around. And I guess I was at that point that I tried to control everything for so long and it hadn't worked for me, and I was out of options. I didn't want to go back to rehab. I knew the statistics on rehabs anyway, you know, that technically a lot of people fail after they go to a rehab. There's not many that actually stay clean and sober after going to a rehab. And I didn't want to be one of those statistics when I left, but I became one, you know. So I'm like, well, rehabs are not the answer. And I'd seen people in the room through the rehab because they took us to meetings when I was in rehab. We did a lot of meetings. You know, I saw working in people's lives, you know. So I guess I was at that stage like, well, I've got nothing to lose. So I just got to be willing now and just give it a go. And it's the best thing I've ever done for myself. Absolutely the best thing I've ever done in my life for myself.
Hi everyone, I just wanted to take a moment to thank you for listening to Beyond Sobriety. This podcast is all about sharing real stories of recovery, resilience and hope. Stories that remind us that we are not alone in this journey. If you'd like to support this work and help us reach more people, there are a few simple ways you can make a difference. Take a moment to like this episode, leave a comment and share it with somebody who you think might benefit from hearing it. Your stories are important. They remind us that we are not alone and help us stay sober. By supporting the show, you're helping to amplify those voices and ensure that people who need to hear this message can find it. If you'd like to share your story and be interviewed, please email me at beyondsobrietyaa@gmail.com. Every journey is unique, and your experience could be exactly what someone needs to hear to find hope, strength, or inspiration. This podcast thrives on real stories from real people. Don't hesitate to reach out. We'd love to connect and discuss how your story can be a part of Beyond Sobriety. Thank you for your support. Together we can continue to build a community of hope and healing. Now, let's get back to the podcast. What's some of your high points in sobriety?
High points? Oh, so many. The biggest high point for me is the fact that I have some self-respect now. I have self-esteem. I have self-worth. You know, all the things that I drank over, you know, they were the biggest things that I drank over because I couldn't function as a person. I was socially awkward. The biggest thing I got from my sobriety was getting my son back in my life, which is a happy and a sad tale. I during my drinking, I pushed my son out of my life completely, especially once I started using meth. For one, he was getting in the way of what I was doing. He was a teenager by then. He was 14. I sent him to live with his dad. He was partly getting in the way of it, but partly I was just ashamed of what I was doing, and I didn't want him to be around the toxic behaviour that was happening in our house. I didn't want him seeing that stuff. So yeah, I sent him to live with his dad, and as a result, eventually he cut me off altogether because I became that unreliable. I would only bring him when it sort of suited me, because I cut everyone off, you know. I isolated myself. I just was doing my thing, you know. When I got sober, all I wanted was my son back in my life, you know, and he was part of the reason why I got sober is because he'd cut me off completely. He'd sent me a message and said, "I can't do this anymore, Mum." And that was the turning point, I think, for me as well, when he said that I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry. Yeah, so I worked hard at just staying sober, you know, for the first 6 months, and he allowed me to go and visit him and meet my grandson. I had a grandson by this stage as well that was 2 that I hadn't met. I saw pictures of on Facebook because his partner allowed me to friend her on Facebook, so I was able to see pictures of my grandson, but you know, I hadn't actually met him. So that was a beautiful moment, meeting my grandson. That's probably the high point, spending some time with them. So yeah, I did that visit, and then that was at Christmas time. My son sort of was distant, obviously, because it'd been a long time, and he was scared of me hurting him again. And I knew it was going to take some time, and I was prepared to do whatever it took, you know, to rebuild our relationship. I knew he was struggling with his own mental health. By this stage, he was drinking as well. He was smoking weed. He was taking coke. He was gambling. He was only 22. He was only a baby. So yeah, he was struggling with his own stuff. But I'm grateful that in, you know, my first year of my recovery, I was able to be a mum again. You know, that was probably the biggest thing that it gave me. You know, even though we were living in different states, he was in Brisbane, I was in Sydney. I was able to have phone calls with him, you know. I was able to identify with what he was going through, which was probably the biggest thing, and just be honest with him and just be loving and just give him some hope. You know, I used to send him little, you know, positive affirmations every day. I'd send him something through, you know. When I did another visit up there in July the following year, so I would have been 13 months sober then. We had a nice visit that weekend. He had some traumas. He went out to a baby shower with his partner, which was at a pub of all places. I've never heard of a baby shower being at a pub, but it was. And he's gone there, and he rang me, and he's like, "Mum, I'm going to have a couple of drinks." He's like, "I'm feeling really awkward," which I understood. I felt the same way, and I'm like, "No worries, mate." And straight away, though, in my head, I'm like, I know where this is going to go. This is going to end badly. And he rang me back again another hour. "Oh, Mum, we're having fun. We're going to stay a bit longer." "Yep, no worries, mate." And yeah, another 2 hours later, another phone call. "Mum, I had a fight with Taylor. I've trashed her car. I've just been let out of the police station. He'd been locked up." And that's what happens, you know. I've seen it and I've heard it happen so many times, you know. And yeah, and I kind of knew that was what was going to happen with him, but And straight away I went into fix it mode. I wanted to go in there and pick him up and save him, but I'm like, no, I'm here with my grandson. I'm staying put. He can find his own way home, and which he did. And I sat down with him when he got home and had a big chat to him for about an hour, and just gave him some hard and some soft support around what he was doing, and told him he needed to make some changes in his life. And I was there to support him through it if he chose to do that. Unfortunately, he took the easy way out, and a couple of weeks later, he took his own life. So I lost my son. So yeah, it's like the best thing that happened in my life turned into the worst thing that happened in my life.
Gosh, I had no idea. Damn.
But
how long ago was that? That was what, 2 years ago?
Yeah, just over 2 years ago. Yeah.
You okay?
Oh, yes and no.
How can you be? What a stupid question.
It's hard. It's really hard. But I'm sober. I'm grateful that I was sober when it happened.
Yeah. Because if you weren't, it would have pushed you over the edge.
Absolutely would have.
And then you would have had a child that just lost its father and a grandparent, and he would have never had the benefit of seeing that.
Yeah.
But you've got the opportunity now to have a positive influence on that it's a little boy, yeah?
Yeah, there's another one as well. He had a second child.
Wow.
Second child, that's why I went up there as well. I forgot to mention that. That's why I went up to visit him in July. It was, they just had the second child. So the baby was only 2 months old. So that's what I did. I spent some time and I decided, I moved back up to Brisbane for a little while and, spent some time with my daughter-in-law and spent some time with my two grandbabies and got to know them. I built a really beautiful relationship with those kids that I never would have had if I was sober. Everyone, all the other people they have in their life, apart from their mum, obviously, because she's sober, and their new stepdad. But yeah, I went up there and I built a relationship with them, and I'm their safe place. They think of me, they think of Nanny, they think of their safe place. Their other grandparents are all still in active addiction, unfortunately. So yeah, I'm the safe one for them. It's a beautiful place to be. I could spend that time and be present. Like I was present with my grandkids like I never was with my son, because alcohol and whatever was going on for me always got in the way, like I did the best I could, but yeah, alcohol always got in the way. It's been a tough road, but I would not have survived that if it wasn't for AA. My AA and God, I believe, carried me through that, even to the point where I had someone from AA flew to Brisbane to go to the funeral with me, yeah.
I think recovering alcoholics are some of the strongest people I know in the world, because we know what it's like to have stared death in the face and to go back from that.
Yeah.
And so any situation that comes our way, we go, yeah, it might be shit. It might be the worst thing in the world, but nothing is worse than going back to where I was.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that would take my life, and we've seen that. We see that over and over again. Like recently, that there was someone who passed away that was attached to a member of our group in over here on Thursdays.
I have been a big part of that too, and that's been awful. Yeah.
But it does.
Someone I was really close to lost someone really close to her. I didn't know him as well as I knew her, but like going through her grief now, like she was the one who supported me through my grief with my son, and now I'm there to return the favour for her. It's like, it's just, it's
so alluring. You get sucked in, by the uppers. You said the party, the fun, the everything that it offers. It promises so much, and then it delivers the exact opposite. It delivers death. It promises life and excitement and happiness, but what it gives you is the exact opposite.
Yeah,
leads down to death and destruction.
Yeah, but I thought it was amazing when I was doing it.
Yeah,
but I thought that was the only thing I ever knew, though, as well. And I'm so glad I've found a different way to live now. And I do have a lot of excitement. I find different ways. I'm trying now, because I'm still learning who I am, because part of my identity was alcohol and drugs. And I did that for 30 years, you know, so that's a long time.
Oh, no, it takes over.
And it did. And so, like, trying to find myself now as a sober person, like, it's taken some time, and that's okay. But, you know, like, now I'm able to try new things, which before I couldn't do because of fear. Fear always held me back from everything, you know. Now I feel the fear and I do it anyway, you know. And I'm always, like, I went to the cricket on the weekend. Like, I've never been to the cricket, and I've never been to the SCG, you know. It's like,
it's a big spot.
It was great. I loved it, you know. It's something I'll probably do again, but it's just trying all these things to see if I even like it. I don't know until I try it, you know. I went hot air ballooning that was back in November, not long ago, you know. That was amazing. Like, just all these different little things that have filled up my recovery, you know. It's been amazing.
It's all good. Don't worry about it. Yeah, no, you know, it's the issue is that it starts off as like an entree, the alcohol, and it becomes the main course, and it becomes everything, and you can't do anything without it, and it takes over.
Yep.
And then you got the idiots out there like, oh, don't trust anyone who doesn't drink, or how can you do this without drinking, or how can you do this without alcohol? And I'm at the point now where I sit there and go, I don't need alcohol to have fun.
No.
I don't need alcohol. Like, I'll freak out. I'll panic. If I couldn't get access to a drink, I'd be like, holy crap, what am I going to do? I'll be there. Just I wouldn't be concentrating on any conversation. Nothing else mattered. I have to get this. I have to get this. I was thinking to the garage. I'd have people over, and I'd have functions with my friends. And I'm from a fairly conservative group of friends that don't drink at all.
Oh, wow.
I'll go into the garage away and be like, I was going to grab something, and I'll be swigging down bottles of wine, half bottles of vodka just to get through the day. And I'm going, these people are my friends. What was I so afraid of? Like, what was so unbearable about being present at that time? And I think you said it well, because you mentioned something earlier. You said, I have self-respect now. And it wasn't them I was trying to get away from, it was me.
Absolutely. It was always me.
That's our issue. Our issue is not others. It's going, I can't deal with what's going on inside my head.
Absolutely. And that was the biggest thing I learned when I came to AA, you know. And for me, when I started working the steps and going through the big book with my sponsor, and I learned that, the problem was never the alcohol.
Yes.
Like, the alcohol was what I did to get rid of the crazy thoughts in my head.
Yeah.
and I can still want to get away from those crazy thoughts in my head if they're there. When I learnt that, you know, that the problem wasn't the alcohol, the problem was me, it was almost a relief for me, you know. It was like, wow, I've actually found an answer. And it's like, because I'd been going through my life as a victim of my own circumstances. I always blamed everyone and everything around me for what was going on in my life. So I would try and, you know, if things weren't working out, you know, it'd be change jobs, change where I'm living. You know, I was a big one for moving away, geographical. So still can be running away from myself.
Yeah.
You know, it was always everyone else. Like, it was my partner's fault, so I'd have to change partners. You know, it was never me.
There's the one person you can't escape.
Absolutely. But I never realised, you know, it was always I was a victim, you know, pour me another drink. And, you know.
No, it's a cliche, but you got me this one.
Love the cliches. And I was just grateful. When I realised that the problem was me, I was like, well, I've got something to work with now. And I was actually willing to look at myself, you know. I mean, even though I still don't like looking at myself, I do it now, you know. I'm happy to do
it. Don't be silly. Have you done the steps?
I've done the steps, I just started again actually a couple of weeks ago with a new sponsor. We're going to look at my emotional sobriety this time. So which has been amazing.
What I found is that I didn't want to be just a guy who just didn't drink. After you get over the desire of wanting to drink, you're left with all the reasons that made you want to drink, and you've got to deal with that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just a miserable old fart who doesn't drink, and that sounds like something nobody wants.
Absolutely.
It's not what I want. I couldn't be like, nah. You keep, I prefer to go back to drinking rather than sit around and just be that.
Absolutely.
I want the promises.
Yeah.
My goal is the promises, and it looks like you got what you wanted. But it's the things that we realise is that we can only affect ourselves. If we try to run away from ourselves with the alcohol and the drugs and whatever it might be, the only way to sort it out is to come back to yourself.
Yep.
And we're not immune from the pain of sobriety.
No. And, I've been subject to a lot of pain during my sobriety. Like, when I got sober, I was still in that relationship with that guy. I was with him for 12 years, and after, when I was about 3 months sober, I think he left. So I had the grief of that. And then a month later, my dad died. And then a couple of weeks later, my granddad died. And then, the next year, my son died. And then I lost my stepfather. Just recently, I've just found out my mum's got terminal cancer, And so I've had a lot of stuff thrown at me in recovery. And now I've learnt to feel my feelings and to sit with them, but I still have troubles with it some days, and some days I'll go, I don't want to feel them today, so I'm going to eat chocolate instead, So
getting food became better than getting drunk.
Exactly, and that's why my head went to, So, food became a problem for me for a while, and then, I gave up cigarettes, but then I picked cigarettes back up because, but the problem is with that is, they don't fix the problem the way alcohol or drugs did. So, I've got to be really mindful of that stuff because if I don't address what's actually going on for me, I could end up picking up a drink again. And that's a really scary thing. And that's somewhere I really don't want to go. My recovery is everything. My recovery is the most important thing in my life today. And I'm so grateful for it. I really don't want to go back to where I was, and I guess, losing my son it could have gone two ways. I could have went back to where I was, or for me, it strengthened my recovery because I'm like, I need to stay sober for my son now,
What's the biggest realisation you've had about yourself?
Fear, mainly.
Taking away the fear? What was your fear?
And emotions.
Yep.
Fear and emotions, yeah. Emotions were definitely a big thing, probably. They're probably the biggest thing, but I grew up in a home, where children, like I said earlier, children are seen and not heard, but we were never taught to experience our emotions either. Everything was pushed down. I remember even as a child, I'd fall over and hurt my knee and be like, oh, you're okay. Always had to be okay, and that's how I grew up. Everything was swept under the carpet. Nothing was addressed. Nothing was dealt with,
Yeah.
So that's how I grew up and didn't know how to deal with my emotions, didn't know. So I drank.
Yeah.
I drank and I drank some more and I never dealt with anything for my whole life. So, I remember getting to relationships and in those relationships, nothing was ever dealt with either. It was just, the steps are an amazing thing. Steps are such an amazing tool. Like,
do you find that they play an important role in your sobriety?
Oh, absolutely. Like I have been able to address a lot of my stuff from my past, Well, a layer of stuff from my past, as I've said, I drank for 30 years, so like I pushed down a lot of stuff over the years and I got out a steamroll and I put concrete over it, so I wouldn't have to look at it. So now, I do have to look at that stuff, but the way I look at it is that I'm working on this stuff in God's time, not my time, and God will show me when I'm ready to know the answers, when I'm ready to learn, that's the biggest thing. The biggest thing I love about this program is the spiritual side of this program. I came in, I definitely had problems with God. I was a believer, of my thoughts were that religion are the biggest problems in the world. They cause a lot of, the wars and stuff like that. So I had a bit of a resentment to God. But when I came in and was told it was a God of my own understanding and it could be whatever I liked, that really worked for me.
Yeah.
And when my sponsor told me to pray, to teach me to turn to that God of my own understanding, I was such a people pleaser, I suppose, which is to my benefit. But I was willing because I had no other option, that I just did it. And when I did that, I saw things happen, So to me, really quickly, it became apparent to me that there was this bigger force outside of myself working for me. And then I came to realise that it had always been there and it had always been looking after me. It's just I'd shut it off because of my drinking and what was going on in my life. I just ignored it.
I think religion is a way that man use, or a system that man uses to get to God, not the other way around. God doesn't need to use religion to get to you.
Absolutely. That's why I look at it too.
Yeah, it's not like, and religion can be abused, it can be perverse, it can be coercive, it can be corrupt, because they're man-made institutions. I guess the God I believe in sees us all as one and just wants an individual relationship with every single one of us. That's how I understand it anyway.
Yep.
But look, we're coming to a close, so I'll ask you what I ask everybody is, what advice would you offer to anybody struggling with alcohol, or anybody or a family member who has somebody in their family that they think they need to get help?
I'd definitely suggest to go to AA.
You want to suggest rehab?
No, definitely not. AA all the way. I've tried rehab. I've seen lots of people try rehab. I mean, it may work for some people, but I believe, the answer is in AA and in the steps.
Yeah.
The steps give us the tool for living, I would suggest just give it a go. You've got nothing to lose, everything to gain. Push through that fear and just do it. That's what I had to do in the beginning, It was like I was full of anxiety and I just pushed through that anxiety and did the things that I needed to do for myself to change my life, because I knew what I was doing wasn't working, It's an amazing program.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for it. It's definitely saved my life.
That's great. Well, look, Tracy, thank you so much for being open. And I have to say, I really enjoyed my time with you this morning. It was a real blessing to be here and to hear your story. And I know it's going to help a lot of people. And so I thank you for being open and transparent and vulnerable with your story. So why don't you help us out by closing us off with a serenity prayer?
Sure, I'd love to. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tracy. Thank you for joining us here today on Beyond Sobriety. Before we wrap up, I'd like to leave you with a gentle reminder. If you happen to recognise anybody who shared their story on this podcast, I urge you to respect their anonymity and privacy. Let's create a safe space where individuals can feel empowered to share their experience without fear of judgment or disclosure. And if you found today's episode helpful or inspiring, I encourage you to share this episode of Beyond Sobriety with someone who might benefit from it. Together we can spread awareness, support and hope for those still struggling with alcohol addiction. Remember, your feedback is invaluable to us. If you have any thoughts, suggestions or stories you'd like to share, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at beyondsobrietyaa@gmail.com. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Once again, thank you for tuning in. Until next time, stay strong, stay sober, and remember, you're not alone in this journey. I'm Michael and I'm an alcoholic.